Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Hi everyone, welcome to Nightlight Part 2. Hope everyone's enjoying the equinox. Dennis said America's Stonehenge had a busy day. Days getting shorter and nights are getting longer, but we're off to a good start to the fall. Barbara and I have professional backgrounds in education, and she had a nice career as a special ed teacher, but even after 10 years of college, I doubt I'll be able to have a high school teaching job after some of these nightlight shows. We had the one guest with a 30-minute long meltdown after reading two of Jack's books. 5 minutes into the show, he said, "Don't believe anything my grandfather said." We spoke at length about a talking mongoose, who or what is the Mothman, and there's the quantum physics of the Shroud of Turin, Nephilim conspiracies to enslave us. School districts aren't looking for teachers well-versed in such subjects. Will tonight's topic of the Shakespeare authorship controversy make me a gooder English teacher candidate, or should I just keep Nightlight as my only classroom and be the
don't
misshapen...
quit your day job, Mark. Don't quit your day job.
I think I'll just end up being the misshapen knave with the tinfoil helmet. But we will be working with my beloved English lit topic tonight, and we'll be challenging the traditional biography of Shakespeare. There's some exciting news coming from the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship camp, and Katherine Chiljan, author of Shakespeare Suppressed, is joining us to discuss their upcoming free webinar on October 2nd and 3rd. And if Katherine is not enough, we have Craig ANSELL, one of the hosts from the Three Beards podcast, joining us tonight. But Barbara, Katherine, and I are three non-beards. So, hi, Craig. Hi, Katherine.
Hey. How are you today?
Hi, Mark. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Craig.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on the show.
The Three Beards had Katherine as a guest a few weeks ago. About a month so ago, and I told Craig, hey, Katherine's going to be a guest with us, and you want to talk more about this authorship controversy, and he jumped at the chance. So, just bringing him on to, he was just fascinated by the subject. So let's keep the conversation going. And so, before, Craig, before we get, really delving into this upcoming webinar and some of these other authorship mysteries, can you tell us a little bit about the Three Beards podcast? It's fun, relaxed atmosphere. Who are your co-hosts? Tell us a little bit about the show.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Thank you, Barbara. And Catherine, a pleasure talking to you again. Really was looking forward to this. Three Beards podcast, we're based here in Central Florida in a town called Winter Garden. And it was just three guys. We just, my co-hosts, Chris Harmon and Austin Burke, we just kind of a mutual love of just talking about just random subjects. And we just hit on it, decided to kick off a podcast, and we did a lot of stuff with sports in the beginning, and then we kind of wanted to dabble in topics. And without going too long here, we hit on a guy named Max Hawthorne, author of Kronos Rising series. Mm-hmm. And we interviewed him, and he just happened to be a really good friend with Mark. And it led to here we are, where we've interviewed people. I mean, when we started this out, I couldn't have envisioned a scenario where I would have been talking to Katherine Chiljan about Shakespeare Suppressed. And then and it was fascinating for me because it was one that it even shocked my sister that I was sitting here on a podcast talking about Shakespeare. So it was a pleasant surprise, and I was actually, it was amazing to me just how into the subject I was at that time. And it's hard to believe it's been, July 22nd is when we interviewed Katherine, and now here we are. It's like, 2 months later, it's like, man, this is crazy.
Yeah, and you're doing your show over Facebook live streaming. It seems like a lot of people are going to that format now. That the sound and visuals are great. You have a really nice mini TV show going on. So if people want to watch it, how do they find you on Facebook?
Facebook under Three Beards Podcast. We have a page. You just like that, and you'll get notifications. Or you can go to YouTube. Same thing, channel Three Beards Podcast, and it enables people, because that was one of the things that we liked about it. Not only could we publish it via your standard podcast formats, we were able to bring some of Katherine's work to the screen, because now we could show pictures, we could show stuff that she was talking about. We were able to bring those things out, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you guys did a nice production on that one.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. It really was great.
Okay.
Well, I won't lie. I was nervous. I'm like, here we got a Shakespeare author coming on the show, and I'm like, I am just a random bearded dude, and I'm going to sit here. She's going to come on here. I'm going to ask some dumb questions. I'm like, I can't even tell you how nervous I was. But I'm glad you had a great time. Thank you.
Okay. Let's get in some new angles of the authorship controversy, and I have a little preface to my question. Does everyone remember that scene from The Godfather when they're sitting in Vito's office and Michael asks Tom, hey, we have newspaper people on the payroll. Tom nodded.
Yep.
So, yeah, the Corleones are distorting the truth, getting their version of the story out. So anyhow, there was that awkward moment last week on one of Nightlight's competing stations that suggested some anchors could be on the payroll of a enemy of the state. So that should be verboten. But we had that recent example, but that goes way back in time, ever since there's ever been printing being done, and the Shakespeare authorship controversy was not unscathed by such a scandal. So, Katherine, in your Shakespeare Suppressed, you state the preface to the First Folio was designed to mislead. So it seems like there had to be someone behind the scenes saying, okay, here's what we want to, how we want to shape the image of this author. And you're saying you present information about who you believe was, and there is evidence as well. But who were the people behind the creation of the First Folio?
Yes, it's very true. You said, I think Shakespeare was a very early victim of propaganda. And the propaganda appeared in the form of a book of Shakespeare's complete play, or 36 of Shakespeare's play. Today we call it the First Folio. And it was in these opening pages where the idea of who Shakespeare was really created. And it attempted to throw the authorship on a humbly born man from a small town of Stratford-on-Avon, which nobody associated with the great author prior to that. The great author was described by contemporaries as totally different, as someone who was someone of high rank, who wrote anonymously or with a pen name, who wrote decades earlier than it is believed by scholars today, that he was a generous patron, that he was well known to university students. This was what was known about him prior to the Folio publication. The great author, in my opinion, was the 17th Earl of Oxford, and he died in 1604. And the Stratford man, who was born with the name William Shakespeare, actually Shakespeare, he died in 1616. And it was 7 years after that this huge book of over 900 pages was printed. And right off the bat, when you look at the front page, you can see how the misinformation is being conveyed. And the very first thing is by saying on the title page that these were the true original copies of the Shakespeare plays, and that is totally incorrect. The plays were imperfect, that the ones that were featured in the First Folio. And actually some of the text given was from previously printed plays of Shakespeare, individual plays, that were in terrible condition. So right off the bat, you have a lie. Secondly, you have these letters written by two actors, one John Hemmings and the other Henry Condell. And they purport that Shakespeare was their friend and fellow, and that he was this natural genius, and that he was a servant of two earls, the earls that the folio book was dedicated to. There's no evidence for these points. And in fact, that letter, dedication letter, and the letter to the reader, which were both signed by these two actors, were actually written by Ben Jonson, who was also a contributor to the opening pages of the preface of the First Folio. So that puts it taints the entire production. There's something odd going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look further into the book, this was a very large book, a large page size, which is called a folio size, and over 900 pages. This is an extremely expensive production. Some estimates are around 300 pounds. It could be more. Now, keep in mind, today that might sound not a lot, but back then it was a huge amount. When you think that an average laborer of the time earned 2 pounds a year, or someone who was a little more educated, maybe 20 pounds a year, and this cost at least 300 pounds. So you have to put it all in context. So it certainly was not these two actors who purportedly put this together. It had to have been somebody of wealth. Now, if you look on the back page of this book, you will see that it names, printed at the charges of, and 4 names, William Jaggard and a few other people. But even then, between those 4 people, again, it was a huge investment, and we know approximately what people paid for this book. And if you take into the high cost of producing it and a relatively low figure that they would be getting back, there was almost no profit. So that puts it very likely that this book was produced by the 2 earls that it was dedicated to, the Earl of Pembroke and his brother, the Earl of Montgomery. And the Earl of Pembroke was one of the richest men in England. His mother was Mary Sidney, who was a renowned writer of the period, and also a patron of other writers. So he was from a literary family, so it would make sense. But he also, being probably the major contributor to this work, it would also mean that he would have some say in the production.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the information from your chapter 9 is something we haven't covered while you've been a guest, and I thought, okay, it's relevant to some things that are going on today about some of the behind the scenes people, and I was looking at getting a lot of information from your pages 157, 158, Earl of Pembroke, and got out my Wilton House souvenir guidebook, And it says, right there on page 2, on the introduction to the tour of the house, it says Philip Sidney wrote his Arcadia, dedicated it to his sister while staying at Wilton. That's his mom was and his mom was someone you just mentioned. Then it says, and if tradition can be believed, Shakespeare and his company of players gave the first performance of Twelfth Night and As You Like It at Wilton. And then I remember, on the tour, I don't know, what walk in, or it was about when you're ready to leave. It was a statue by one of the doorways, and they do have a statue of Shakespeare, and he is pointing at that out brief candle from Macbeth passage. It's life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It's right there. And it's like, okay, I had seen that Frontline video before about a year before I made that trip. And I saw it, and I was like, it's interesting. Okay, you get this Shakespeare connection, and it's not really proving anything, but it gives you something. It makes you think. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. It was just not conclusive proof there, but that line from Macbeth does seem pretty similar to was it like sonnet? Was it 76? Wait, wrong page. Yeah, it's like my name be buried. 72. I'm sorry. My name be buried where my body is.
Signifying nothing.
Right.
Right. Which could be nothing. Could be an O, and that could be Oxford. It's just a little connection.
Okay. Well, yeah. It's just interesting that same. With the the statue of Shakespeare with his finger just kind of like pointing that passage out, kind of goes back to some of the sonnets written. If you follow the traditional biography, 25 years earlier, it just seems like there was this like a fatalistic view that what I'm doing just it's fine for the moment, but it's not going to amount to anything.
Yes, and you're right. It is reflected in some of the sonnets, and I think that he knew that his name would be not associated with his masterpieces, and I think, of course, it probably really hurt him deeply. But he may have done it for a higher cause, which we can maybe get into a little later. But Wilton is interesting, and definitely because they're Herbert brothers. They're Earls of Pembroke and Montgomery. They are directly responsible for us having the play that you quoted, Macbeth, which was not previously printed. 20 Shakespeare plays appeared in the First Folio, and that was a tremendous. We owe them a tremendous debt, so we're totally grateful that they reprinted these plays. Otherwise, they would have been lost. I mean, that's more than likely because we don't know where the original play manuscripts are. So on one hand, we have to be very grateful to these brother earls, but they were also the ones who put forth the idea, hinted, that the Stratford man was really the great author. So, it's you have mixed feelings about it. But interestingly, the Earl of Montgomery was married to Oxford's youngest daughter, Susan. So there's another connection right there between the true author and one of the people that the book was dedicated to.
Interesting. And I asked, and when we were doing some show prep, I said, I was looking through this souvenir guidebook, and I said, there's the family painting is in the double the room that's called the double cube room, and that room was featured in a couple scenes from Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. There's like Barry and his son Brian were sitting on the long couch under this huge painting, and then you get a few exterior shots. I think when Brian's birthday party and there's the little Shetland ponies.
Oh, yeah.
It was that was that's the exterior of that house, the Wilton house. It's and you said, okay, there's like a Oxford connection would be in that painting. I was like,
yes,
wow,
well,
cool.
That it's a very large painting, and there are the children of the Earl of Montgomery, of course, by Oxford's daughter, Susan Vere. They had several children, I think 5, 6, or 7 children, and so really in that painting you're looking at Shakespeare's grandchildren, which is very interesting. And also interesting research has been done about the lady. It's the Earl of Montgomery and his wife. Now, they always say that it was his second wife that's being depicted there, but actually research shows by Bonner Cutting that it may very well have been his first wife, Susan, who had passed away when the painting was done. And one indication would be her arms being folded is symbolic for somebody who has passed away. So it's kind of an intriguing picture.
Okay, that was, I was, just trying to come up with some new questions. That chapter 9 in your book just kind of like reminded me of all this stuff from, my little day trip to Wilton House, and actually getting to be in the same room where Kubrick filmed a couple scenes, and I think you get another scene at the end where Barry and Lady Lyndon were writing more and more checks to pay all their debts. It was that was a really cool experience. Okay, I'm getting close to being done with this trip down memory lane.
That was a great film, by the way, one of my favorites.
Oh, it's actually, most
so
people. So
beautifully shot.
Oh yeah, most people kind of overlook it. Like right after 2001, Clockwork Orange, and then everyone wants to like watch The Shining. and they kind of forget Barry Lyndon, but it's actually a wonderful movie. Okay, Craig, do you have a question?
No, yeah.
Yeah,
no. I'm sitting back.
I'm stopping
back here, realizing I'm actually getting taking my nice school lesson right now because I'm being educated as we go because there's a lot of stuff. As I'm listening to it, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that either. I'm like, as Katherine, you were describing it, I'm sitting here ripping off pieces of notebook paper and shoving it inside the book and dog-earing things so that way I know where to go back to and read. But,
well, it's a mystery, but it's historical. It's not, literary criticism of a Shakespeare play. It is about the facts, about the man. And once you see how few there are, you want more. You want to understand more, and it gets very addicting. It's addicted me for over 30 years.
Yeah, and there was the one, and I don't know if you remember, I emailed you that question, kind of a quick one. It was a gentleman on YouTube. He goes by Bastian Conrad, but he posed a question, to me. I didn't know the answer to it. He wanted to know why, in our episode, why we did not even touch on Christopher Marlowe, Kit Marlowe, as in the discussion. And I told him that next chance I talked to you that I would definitely ask. It's like, what was it about him that was the deciding factor where you discounted and said, okay, I'm not looking at him?
Well, the quality of Shakespeare's plays and the quality of Marlowe's plays, to me, they're two different objects, and Marlowe died when he was barely 30. He was just about to turn 30, and there's about 36 plays. Some say a lot more, like Ramon Jimenez. He wrote a book called Shakespeare's Apprenticeship, which takes into account early versions of similar plays to Shakespeare, which really may have been by Shakespeare, not by some mysterious person. So it could be as high as 50 plays. So if you want to get 50 high-quality dramas out of a 30-year-old, it doesn't quite compute. You would have to believe that he did not die, even though we have like a coroner's account of his murder in an inn. You'd have to believe that he didn't die, that it was all a ruse, and that he went to Europe and wrote plays and then somehow sent them back. So to me, it gets less and less likely. And I just don't think that he was of the same writing caliber as the great author. So that's why. Some people think he wrote it. Before Marlowe, it was Bacon, Sir Francis Bacon, from about the mid-1800s up until our theory was, or our man was founded by J. Thomas Looney, 1920. He was the candidate. Bacon was the candidate. And it made sense in some ways because he was so well educated. And you can see that same level of education, you can see it in the Shakespeare plays. But Bacon had a huge body of philosophical works and works of science. And it's not likely that he would have been able to encompass the huge Shakespeare canon plus what he achieved on his own. So I think all the evidence points to the Earl of Oxford, especially life parallels. There's so many, and especially in the character of Hamlet, who was a nobleman, a courtier, a traveler. He killed somebody. These are all characteristics of the Earl of Oxford. And a great one, which I always bring up, when Oxford took his grand tour of Europe, and on his way home, he's crossing the English Channel from France, and his ship gets attacked by pirates, which is just what happened to Hamlet. The same thing. So he more than likely was telling his own story in that case. And there's even more ties. Polonius is believed to be, that's a character in Hamlet, is believed to have been a portrayal of Lord Burleigh, who was the Earl of Oxford's father-in-law. So, the parallels kind of just keep adding up. And that's just one play. And, of course, if you look at the sonnets, which were the most autobiographical, you see things that are applicable to the Earl of Oxford. Like, for example, the Dark Lady in Shakespeare's sonnets. He talks about this dark-haired lady, a beauty, that he was obsessed with. And, the same thing was true of the Earl of Oxford. He had an extramarital affair with Anne Vavasor. They had a child together. And consequently, Queen Elizabeth threw them both in the tower along with a baby. So, you have parallel after parallel. It just keeps going.
Now, that was so much more eloquently done than my I don't know. I'm just going to tell you. When I responded, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, you said it so much better. I wish you could have been there to respond for him.
Yeah.
That's...
Well, maybe he's listening. Who knows?
Yeah, I can only hope, because because at least I did what I promised. I got an answer from the author.
You can send him the archives tomorrow.
That's all I'll have to do. I'll have to send a link to it. It's like, see, I kept my promise. I found an answer for you. Yeah.
But one thing we all share, whether it's Baconians or Marlovians or Oxfordians, we all believe the great author was not the Stratford man. So once you get rid of the Stratford man, then you have to look at the works, and that's what the method of J. Thomas Looney, who discovered the Earl of Oxford. He made a list of characteristics of, what this man was like, what he knew, that he was unconventional, that he had a classical education, that he was a recognized poet, that he had interest in Italy and sports and music. He made all these characteristics, and after everything, it fit the Earl of Oxford like a glove, and that was his great discovery. And it's a really great book, and called Shakespeare Identified. He's very methodical, rational, logical, and he just comes to amazing conclusions. And so it's been 100 years, and we're celebrating it this year.
Yeah, and it was kind of it was a little bit of follow-up to the discussion you and Mark had just a little bit ago when you were talking about the First Folio. As I was looking, that was right in the beginning, second paragraph there in chapter 9, where it was when you looked at just for the time period, 907 pages for this First Folio, just the cost that would be involved in producing all those copies to give out there. I mean, that's a pretty hefty undertaking, especially in that time period.
Yes,
I was shocked.
What was paid for it was so small compared to the investment that it was really not a money-making venture, in my opinion. So, therefore, somebody who had money, like the Earl of Pembroke, who the book was dedicated to, he had to have had contributed in a big way. And also, if you look at the other people who are mentioned in these opening preface pages, you have short poems by James Mabb and Hugh Holland and Johnson and Leonard Diggs. These people were not playwrights. They were not poets, really. They wrote some verses, but they were not professionals. So why were they used for the task, to do this? Why not celebrated poets and playwrights of the time? Well, only Ben Jonson was the one. Ben Jonson was the protege of the Earl of Pembroke. I mean, the Earl of Pembroke, sponsored him from 1605 onward. The Earl of Pembroke was responsible for Ben Jonson to get an annuity of £66 a year. So he was very much, Ben Jonson, beholden to Pembroke. And you can see that he had the dominating hand in these opening pages. So I think they worked together to create this, fake story about the true author's identity, which was, totally misleading. And also, those other men were in some way connected to either Pembroke or Montgomery, including the person who did that engraving that we all know, that black and white engraving. There may have been a connection there with the Earl of Montgomery, which I give in the book. So it seems to be a Pembroke and Jonson production, which is the title of that chapter.
And I really like shouldn't like us too. I really love the images that you've added along inside the book too, because not only it saves you the Google searches of having to search up some of the things too. It's like, man, it was right there. I can look at it and I can actually read them. And I really appreciate you putting those in the book.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it took me 7 years, and it's the book that I wish I had when I first was exposed to this topic many, many years ago, and I finally did it. So I tried to make it as understandable as possible. It is a complicated topic. And, a lot to know.
Yeah, Craig, you always like that sack of grain guy for the original outline of how the monument was to be designed. None of that has anything to do with writing. When we first started discussing this,
Bill with
like,
the wool sack.
Yeah. What does any of that have to do with the local boy made it big in London as a writer? There's no the little cherubs with the shovels and hourglass. Really doesn't indicate that this monument is for an author. You said just sat there and like punched holes through it. Once you started looking at this, was the original draft.
Yes, if you look at the original documentary evidence of what the monument in the Stratford-on-Avon Church really looked like, it's very different from what's there today. And I give evidence showing that it was probably changed around 1650, right around there. I think it may have been damaged in the English Civil Wars in the 1640s, and the town probably rebuilt it to make it look more like an author instead of a man holding a sack of wool, maybe. So they wouldn't have maybe visitors saying, "Where is the Shakespeare monument?" And maybe they came up with this guy with an upturned mustache holding a pen and paper, but it was not the original. The original was a man with a downturned mustache, full beard, holding a sack of some sort. And that wasn't the only change. There were structural changes too. Like, for example, there were leopard heads, a leopard, the face of a leopard on the original monument, which is not in the current monument. And leopard head was the symbol for the town of Stratford-on-Avon. So if you were some sort of official for the town, you would have the right to have that on a monument. And, well, that was not true for the Stratford man, the William Shakespeare. His father was held in office in the town, but not his son. So that's why we think It was not my theory. It was Richard Kennedy came up with this idea that it actually the original monument was to John Shakespeare, the Stratford man's son. So it just keeps going on and on. Every aspect of this topic has some odd mystery attached to it.
I'm one for symbolism. If you look at that, the juxtaposition between the two, the stained glass window behind it. Has anybody ever thought of the symbolism of the fact that there's a sacrifice going behind the picture? You know, the monument to Shakespeare.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
There's some sort of sacrifice?
There's a bowl on an altar being burned while you have four figures. One is holding a sword or a dagger.
I never noticed that.
In the color copy.
Good.
And that's why, because there's always, I always pick up on the symbolism, and I'm wondering was that something that was planned, or was that just something that happened to be by coincidence that you would have an image of a sacrifice, a la the Stratford man being given forth as, that this isn't, that there's something else being done. So I was just curious if you'd ever caught on to that.
Craig,
very interesting.
Can I interject here? Because the sword and the bowl also is significant of an initiation of some sort.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, exactly. So I was just curious if anybody else had caught on that, because I just noticed that as you were talking.
That's the first time I've heard of it. Very interesting. Very good. Good observation. To my knowledge, the stained glass windows were added in the 19th century, but they still may have known something that they wanted to. The town. That's a very interesting thing. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, the Earl of Oxford sacrificed his love, his notoriety.
Yes.
To give away for the Stratford man to take that. Yeah, I don't know. Just one of the symbolism, and that's, just like Barbara said, it's also the thing of initiation. That's pretty. Yeah, so that's cool.
It fits. Yes, very good.
Craig, you want to keep going, or?
No, I'm sorry. It was just as we were listening. Before I forgot about it, I wanted to bring it up and just okay, sorry, I wanted to interject real quick. I just discovered. I want to see if anybody else noticed this.
Yeah, cool.
No, that's the first I've heard
I'll stop
it.
interrupting.
Good. Yeah.
That's great. Hopefully, after the show, everyone goes to look at the monument on. Google it, and hopefully the stained glass window will be there. Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
A great place to go would be ShakespeareSuppressed.com and purchase a book. And look at that picture.
There you go.
That would be a fantastic place to go.
Okay, and Katherine, you bring up from 1564 to 1584. We don't have any school records from Shakespeare. Then we go from 1585 to 1592 that are considered the lost years. Yeah. And you write a little bit in Shakespeare Suppressed about Venus and Adonis. That what came out like 1593. So Shakespeare just suddenly appears on the scene out of with no education, writes this. Even my college Shakespeare books that very well respected poems, probably what Shakespeare is best known for during his lifetime. So was this, do you think this was like a beginner's luck type situation, or was there a lot more writing going on much earlier? And like kind of working Craig's question about Christopher Marlowe, and you said he only lived to be 30, and he was still he was good at what he did. He wasn't the leading playwright of the time. He didn't have the life experience yet, and it's something we can talk about in a little bit. But with the poem Venus and Adonis, would you attribute this poem's success to someone who had been practicing honing his craft for a lot longer than the traditional Shakespeare biography tells us?
Yeah, they go by what the author wrote in his dedication, that it was the first heir of his invention, meaning his first creative work. But that doesn't make sense, because this is a highly sophisticated poem. A sophisticated rhyme scheme is used, very erotic. It was a huge bestseller. It's very unlikely that it was a poem of this caliber would be the first thing he ever wrote. It's very unlikely. But there's a better explanation for him saying it's the first heir of my invention. It's the invention is not the poem. It's his pen name of William Shakespeare, because on this poem, Venus and Adonis, is the very first time that the name William Shakespeare appeared in print. That was 1593. So the first heir of the pen name is Venus and Adonis. So that, to me, makes a lot more sense. And this was followed by another very popular poem, The Rape of Lucrece, the year after, which was also hugely popular. And I'd say most students or people who've looked into the plays don't know a lot about these two poems, but they were enormously popular in Shakespeare's time. And most of the comments were about those two poems, and less so for the plays. The world only learned that he was a playwright about 5 years later, in 1598, when someone wrote a book of literary criticism, and he wrote down Shakespeare play titles, about 12 of them. So that was really the first time in print that people knew that this quote-unquote William Shakespeare was also a playwright. So that's it's all you have to do is just look at what people wrote about the great author while he was alive, and it's a different picture than what scholars today, still to this day, they still go by the line that he was barely educated and just came out of nowhere in 1593, just perfectly formed. And we even have two writers of the period making reference that this name was a pen name. They didn't say so directly. It's in Shakespeare Suppressed. They didn't say so directly. Like for one of them, Gabriel Harvey, he said that he was geared, that in essence he was saying that Shakespeare was his armor, the pen name. So, if you read these contemporary accounts, you can see that they were telling the world that Shakespeare was a nobleman and that he was using a pen name. You just have to read them to them a little bit deeper than you would on the surface. And why would we have to do that? Why didn't they just openly say so? Because he was a nobleman. He was a nobleman who didn't want recognition in his lifetime. Because being deeply involved in poetry and playwriting was considered, frivolous. It's not something a nobleman is supposed to do. He's supposed to be doing more serious matters like, being in the military or being a counselor to the queen. And so during his lifetime, he didn't want it to be known. So they were trying to be careful on his own behalf. But after his death, that is when he should have gotten credit, and he didn't. And that is the great issue here. Why didn't he get credit? And on top of it, why did they want to throw it on the Stratford man? And that brings us back to the Earl of Pembroke, the wealthy man who constructed this whole concept through Ben Jonson.
It just keeps getting more fascinating. Craig, what do you think?
Oh no, it's definitely I honestly feel like I'm sitting in a lecture right now. Just I'm taking notes as we're going along, and this is
I'm something that English professors should be discussing, but they don't want to discuss it. They're just happy with the traditional story. They don't want to upset the apple cart. And if you really care about the great author of Hamlet and Macbeth and all these wonderful plays, you should do at least that much to look into it. Look at their own evidence. And what it comes down to is that it's an unproven theory that the Stratford man wrote the works. Why don't you prove your theory? For us, it's not a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy that's a fact. It was a factual conspiracy. All the evidence lines up to that. But no evidence connects the great author to the Stratford man other than this piece of propaganda, the opening pages of the First Folio.
Okay. Katherine, since you and Craig just mentioned professors and lectures, we need to spend a little bit of time talking about the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship webinar coming up October 2nd and 3rd, and the speakers are not just talking about the man from Stratford did not write the plays and sonnets, and there's no documentation that shows that he couldn't have written the play. What your group does is far more than that. You have a lot of diligent researchers and insightful lecturers covering a wide range of topics. Okay, this is a free webinar, so that's good. People can watch it in the safety of their own homes. You don't have to get out of your pajamas. Just go to the computer and sit there all day and watch some captivating presenters.
Yes, and some of them have been pre-recorded, and some of them, including me, will be streamed live. And so we really hope everybody will register. It's free. You can register online. You just go to ShakespeareOxfordFellowship.org and put in your email and you can get all the information necessary and watch some very interesting lectures. We're a very diverse crowd. Like for example, the first speaker is Dr. Earl Showerman. He was a retired emergency room doctor, and his topic is Shakespeare and politics from the 16th to the 21st centuries. We have James Warren, who put out a new edition of J. Thomas Looney's book, Shakespeare Identified, and he talks about the book and the how his book was received, and he has tracked down hundreds of letters and things like that by Thomas Looney. And we have Stephen Sable, who is an actor, totally into this, and he's going to do a topic on the mentors to genius. He also does a great podcast called Don't Quill the Messenger, which is sponsored by the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. So he'll be there. Ramon Jimenez that you mentioned, he's going to do 10 eyewitnesses who saw nothing, meaning people who were literate, who knew the Stratford men, who never said any word of knowing that they knew the great author, William Shakespeare. So, just by silence, it's telling us something. And I myself will be doing something on the Tempest, the character Prospero, and a parallel with an Italian man named Prospero Visconti, the parallels between those two characters, and with hints of the Earl of Oxford thrown in too. So I hope everybody will look into it. Those are just a few.
Like Katherine, your presentation sounds interesting. And Tempest is what traditionally viewed as Speare's farewell play, and that's where the play that has "O Brave New World" in it. Yes.
So many wonderful lines, and it appears that the character was initially based on this Italian gentleman who was a native of Milan, just like Lord Prospero. He was the Duke of Milan. So I get into those parallels. It's very interesting, and it's very, very, very possible that the Earl of Oxford met this Prospero Visconti. And we even have images of Prospero Visconti. So I think it will be a very enlightening talk.
Okay, and that's a real possibility since the Earl of Oxford did travel pretty extensively through Italy, and he was in northern Italy as well. The traditional biography of Shakespeare says that he never left the country. So
exactly.
I'll be looking forward to seeing what you come up with with this contrasting fictitious character with a historical person, and that reminds me of...
Hey, this is not an unusual thing. The Stratfordian, regular Orthodox Shakespeare scholars have looked for somebody that Shakespeare based the character on. They've been searching, and actually somebody found it, but they rejected it, probably because he had to have been in Italy to have even known of this person. So they always have to stop short and say, nope, can't be him.
Okay.
Because he never, as far as they know, the Stratford men never went to Italy. And yet, if you look at play after play, so many plays are set in Italy. Play after play have specific details that are incidental, not something you'd pick up in a travel book, that occur. You have to be there to know. And it's very evident that the writer of the plays went there and knew it very well.
And Katherine, what's the city? I think it was from Mark Anderson's book that has the cypress trees outside of the medieval city.
Outside of like the western wall of Verona. And that's what that passage is in the opening lines of Romeo and Juliet. This is just an incidental thing, but a wonderful scholar, Richard Rowe, he picked up on these little incidental details and tried to prove that they were actually existed. And sure enough, 400 years later, he goes to the Western Wall, and there are sycamore trees there. So that's a wonderful book called The Shakespeare Guide to Italy, 2011. And he has since passed away, but it was a wonderful effort that took him many decades, and it was a wonderful work.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know how people could, just say, this Oxford idea is a conspiracy theory, and the Stratfordian that's the official story, and we're going to stick to it. But there's all these like you said, with the Shakespeare in Italy book. I mean, that's a detail that someone has to be there to see. And Mark also covered that painting on the ceiling, a fresco on the ceiling in one of the palazzos. Someone has to, and it's accurately written about in one of the longer poems. Like someone had, the writer had to be there, and there is no documented proof that Shakespeare ever left England.
Yes, in fact, there were several paintings that the great author viewed that were known in Europe, but there weren't images in England. And like one, for example, was done by Titian, and it's Venus and Adonis, right? Which just so happened to be a Shakespeare poem. And Titian, the artist, he's a Venetian artist, he made several versions of Venus and Adonis. And of the 5 versions that he made, only one portrays Adonis with a hat, a hunting hat. And that is described in Shakespeare's poem. He's wearing a bonnet. So, and other details show that he actually saw this particular version. And this particular version was with Titian until his death in 1576, and the Earl of Oxford was in Venice in 1575 and 1576. So, again, you've got a lovely, perfect match of how, the Earl of Oxford could have seen this, could have acquired this information, but not, of course, for the Stratford man. And the Stratford man never claimed to be the author. That's something that we can't forget. He and his family never claimed it. It was this book of propaganda. Well, really, it's a wonderful book of Shakespeare plays, but just the opening 16 pages was that be just won't question it. And because the powers that be today will not question it, it's up to people like me who are not connected to, a university or academia. We're the only ones who can tell the world about it. To people who are interested, people like Craig. He knew nothing of this, but once he heard about it, it became something really interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think so much more people would be interested in Shakespeare if they knew about this, if they knew who the real author was and his incredible life that he had. I mean, we just barely touched the surface of the scandals and things that were surrounding him in his lifetime. It was quite a life, and you can see a lot of the life reflected in the plays, and you can gain better insight into them. And they make them more enjoyable.
Well, I brought that up a little bit with you as well about just for me where, how much better is learning about these, just all the sonnets, everything when you actually have more of a, context of who the author was as opposed to just somebody that was just given credit. Now you have, like when I brought up some of the lines from Hamlet, there's so much more depth to these things as you read them when you realize this is somebody that actually lived this story.
Yes. And everybody loses by not acknowledging the true author. Everybody, including the author himself, who was a victim of this propaganda. I don't think he ever would have believed. I think that he thought his works would just be anonymous. I don't think he thought that it would be contrived to throw it on somebody who was born with a similar name to his pen name. I don't think he would have believed that. So it is an injustice that really needs to be remedied.
Okay, and
hopefully you've made a good step towards that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Katherine, the fellowship website, or you can get to the fellowship's YouTube channel through the fellowship website. I was watching one of the videos, and it happened to be on Alexander Pope's editing or involvement in the editing, and just went through the Tempest. For some ideas, to talk about, and Alexander Pope is credited with some of the corrections in the Tempest. Was that your friend Bonner's presentation, where that was about 100 years after De Vere or Shakespeare died? Alexander Pope was like one of these people behind this revising of the Shakespeare canon. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Sorry, I didn't see that talk.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think the relevant point is that the plays have been constantly edited over the centuries because we never have the originals. So many lines. There are hundreds of lines that to this day, scholars don't know really what was meant, or if it was, mistakenly heard and mistakenly written down. There's a lot of these instances. And in my opinion, we haven't really read the real Shakespeare plays because we haven't seen the originals. That's another reason why, if we are on the trail of the right man and the right author, we might be able to find these missing plays. Where are they? It appears that the Earl of Pembroke and Montgomery, even though they were related to the Earl of Oxford, it appears they did not have his originals because the folio text is imperfect in many cases, in many instances. So, where are the missing manuscripts? Where are the real Shakespeare plays? And that gets me very excited to the possibility that they're sitting buried somewhere in a wall or somewhere.
Right.
And,
under that plaque that threatens not to move it.
Millions of people or thousands of people trying to find it, maybe we'll find it. But right now, there's just a very limited amount of researchers.
Well,
because it's being held back, this issue. Yeah. So.
No, it really is a fascinating topic, and like I was saying with that Alexander Pope and some of the people behind some of the editing about 100 years after the author died. That was another angle that really captured my attention. And I know it's starting to get late for everyone. We're running a little bit over time, but if people have really enjoyed this, the information that you've presented and Craig's questions, they can go to attend the webinar on October 2nd and 3rd. Hear you and Ramon Jimenez. He's been a guest with us, and Saturday is speakers all day. So there's going to be many different angles of this mystery presented in a couple weekends. And Katherine, could you give us the website again and explain how to register for the to be able to watch it, and we can start kind of wrapping up the evening unless anyone has any last-minute questions.
Well,
okay.
Well, the place to go for this webinar on October 2nd and 3rd is Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship.org. And if you look on the right side of the page, there's a little red box saying Shakespeare Authorship Symposium, and you just open that, and there's a form. You just fill out your email address, and you submit it, and you'll get the information to how to attend. And we hope you'll take a look. Everyone will take a look and get more information on this topic. And also, another great website besides mine is ShakespeareSuppressed.com, and you can buy the book through me on the website, or you can go to Amazon and purchase it. Another great website is doubtaboutwill.org, which is there's something that's called the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt about the Stratford Man as the great author. And it's a list of people who have read this declaration and signed it, and their credentials. And you can see that they're very educated people in all disciplines find a problem with the Stratford Man as the great author, and a lot of good information on that site as well.
Okay. Okay.
I know I don't want to ask any more questions because my homework's already big enough as it is. No, I think I've got about 30 pieces of notebook paper in this book right now. So
we're going to have to do this again, and I want to get into the 10 letters at some point. But we'll talk about that. I was captivated by that discussion as well. During all this not being able to go out of the house much, I'd sit there and watch all these videos, and I get these ideas. So I want to have you back to. We'll have to do this. Keep doing this and covering, introducing more material when.
Yes, I'd love to. Appreciate you and Barbara for allowing us to talk about this topic so many times. I appreciate your favor in that regard.
Yeah, I'm just captivated, and so is Craig. And okay, Craig can come back for that whenever we schedule that show. So if everyone feels like they said their piece, we could probably wrap this show. And I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. And Barbara, thank you for producing the show, and thank you to the listeners. And we have a bunch. Keep checking barbaradelong.com for all the upcoming shows. We got a whole bunch of neat shows in the works. It's almost every day now. And us, Katherine, Craig, thank you very much. And Barbara, you can shut down the show now. We'll see everyone next